All right. This is episode 17, recording as of April 26th, 2026, which means I believe that this puts this video exactly 1 year and 6 days from my old one. We moved. Finally, officially. It only took forever. The real number of interest, I suppose, is actually 431, which is the number of days between when my wife and I proposed to our respective bosses that we'd be able to move and when we actually closed on the house we went under contract with. The sale itself, getting under contract, oddly enough, is probably the least interesting story. But I'd like to catch you up on that so that there's a record of that before we get back into the old format of doing week-by-week updates. So, when my wife and I were considering moving, our we did, cost benefit, what our estimates were. We thought we could get for our townhome somewhere in the range between 340 and 380. Obviously hoping more for 380, but any of those dollar amounts would do as far as making the move financially viable, right? So our realtor, though, she initially listed us at 420. Now, I had objections to that, but of course, I'm not a realtor. I don't know anything about the industry. I didn't know anything about the market. So I went with her estimate there, and I think that was a grave mistake. I think that our townhome was the least updated. We had the most problems, and there was a lot of reason to not list at that price point. And it took us, I think, easily the first 5 months of looking when we listed in February to finally drop the price below 400. And even then, that wasn't sufficient. So, we were dropping the price steadily, 5-10 grand at a time, until I think mid-September. Our realtor comes to us and says, "Hey, I just got out of this class, and I think we should advertise your home as an assumption loan." And for those of you that don't know, an assumption loan allows the buyer to assume the mortgage and interest rate of the seller, which was very appealing to my wife and I because we bought our home in late 2021 before the rates went insane. So our mortgage was at a 3% interest rate. And the best you were going to get at the time, even with a great credit score, was like 5.5, maybe more. So huge savings over the lifetime of the loan. So we put the home up in mid-October, advertising it now as an assumption loan. And within a handful of days, or within maybe 2 weeks, we have an offer coming in at right around 365, which is, they underbid us. We were at 380 at the time, but, we'd been on the market at that point since February. We were so sick and ready to move, and it was still within the threshold that we were looking for. So we agreed. One small thing of note is that when the buyer was coming to look at the house, we were initially very annoyed because when they left, they engaged the footlock on the sliding glass door, which was how we got in and out of the house. So I ended up having to go reach through the dog door to disengage that lock so that we could get inside. Bunch of idiots. So once they put the offer down, they want to do all these inspections, and we're like, okay, all right, do your inspections. And something super weird happened where they showed up like 15 minutes early. We were still trying to get the dogs out of the house. My wife was still trying to get the baby in the car. And the agent runs up and introduces us to the buyer. It really felt like she was doing like a sob story kind of thing where she's like, oh, they really just couldn't afford this if you guys weren't doing the assumption. And isn't it nice? It's a small family getting their start in Golden just like you guys are. Meanwhile, we're like, dude, we just don't care. Like, we don't care, whatever. So they ask for a bunch of concessions. Ultimately, we tell them no because we were like, we're not giving you 10 grand to scrape the popcorn ceiling. Um, and I mean, technically it had asbestos in it, but we're like, guys, screw off. Do it yourself. You're putting 80 grand down so that you don't have to get a second loan on this house to cover the difference between the value, the purchase price you're buying it at, and the mortgage that you're assuming. So anyway, that realtor supposedly specializes in the assumption loan process. So we were encouraged by that, and then we contracted a company called UMI, UMI, to help us with the assumption loan. I'm not sure how we found them. My wife thinks that our realtor suggested them because they were the people that she had worked with and was most comfortable with. And that ended up being a grave, grave mistake. So in early November, our understanding was that our buyers submitted an assumption package to Chaffa, the company that the company that our mortgage is through, the Colorado Housing and Finance business. I don't know. And then we let it go. I got on the phone with a guy from UMI around that time, and he was like, hey, I always want to let people know this process takes a while. It takes like 90 days. And, at the time we were like, that's perfect. It's November. We had a trip back to visit my wife's family in Louisiana in late November. We had the holidays in late December, and then we were going to Disney in early January. So we were like, that's great. You'll be wrapping up right around end of January, early February. So we started looking. We started looking for places in Cheyenne in in early December to mid-December. And we found a place that we just absolutely loved. And, it was a little tough with the buyer. There was a little bit touch and go there, or with the seller, excuse me. It was a little bit touch and go because he wanted to keep the house on the market so that they could accept contingent offers. And we just couldn't have that because we had to wait on the loan on the assumption process to close, and there wasn't we were like, there's going to be no definitive. They told us there's not going to be a definitive timeline until we start getting within like a couple weeks. But he agreed to remove that element so that he wouldn't advertise it to other people. We were basically asking. He asked us to pay full price that he was asking. We were fine with that. It was the best house we had looked at by far. So we get under contract with him, and in the contract we included an optional 3-week extension, thinking, okay, if something goes wrong with the assumption, at least we could trigger that, and that'll get us to mid-February. Fast forward to January 20th, which is like burned into my memory now for the rest of all time. My wife and our realtor are trying to get a timeline out of UMI to tell us when we can expect to close, so that we can start scheduling closings, so that for both for the property we were selling and the property we were buying. And UMI's being like evasive about it. They're like not giving definitive answers. So my wife and Vanessa are really pushing, and I'm only like loosely paying attention. I'm trying to get myself prepared at work so that I can make the transfer. I get a call from my wife that says, I spoke to Yumi, and Yumi says this process actually takes closer to 217 days. And so my heart just absolutely sinks in my chest because, bless me, my heart just absolutely sinks in my chest because we're already under contract. We've done inspections. We had an engineer come over, all of that good stuff. And that triggered a multi-month process wherein I made 72 phone calls over 11 and a half hours, all of which had to be done during business hours, all in the hope of pushing Chaffa to get this done faster so that we didn't lose the house that we were under contract with. So I want to go over each of those instances individually so that we can sort of keep the story straight. But essentially, Yumi's excuse for quoting us the wrong date, because we were extremely confused, because I had been told by someone at Yumi that it was going to be 90 days. We had our realtor had been told by someone at Yumi that it was going to be 90 days. We were getting weekly update texts from Yumi that also said expected close date February 2nd, and if you went into the details section, an extra 90 days. And Yumi was basically just like, oh yeah, sorry we misquoted you. Chaffa's one of the 5% of loan companies that drag this process out as long as humanly possible. So they proceeded, I guess the supervisor of that guy, because his name was Alex, and I hated that man, because we would call and basically be like, you've screwed us. You understand that, right? We've put money down on this new property, and we're potentially going to lose it now, and that money, because you gave us the wrong timeline. And explicitly on your website it says, if you get worried about your loan, don't be worried. It's not falling through the cracks. We're working on it as fast as we can. And so you gave us explicit instructions not to be checking in on you, and you quoted us the wrong timeline until literally 13 days before we thought we were going to close. We're talking with our realtor on our realtor Newt, who, God, cannot say enough good things about that man. I mean, he and our lender on the side of purchasing, so for buying the property we got in Cheyenne, those two they came through every single time we asked. I mean, I genuinely just can't say enough good things about them. I mean, I'm telling you, it felt like everybody in this deal was working against me except for them, and I can't. And I mean, I would never. Not that we want to sell our property or that we want to move anytime soon, but if we were ever going to, those two would be the only ones I'd ever want to work with. Shoot, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, so we're talking with Kenny and Newt, trying to keep the buyer in the deal. Fortunately, the property we were looking to get was a rental, so nobody was in it. And the guy who owned it, not that we knew this at the time, but we did learn this much later, he had a lot of equity in the house. So it's not like he was, really dying to get out of here. He is in the military in some capacity, I suppose. So he's and he was deploying, which is why he wanted to close by, I think, March 3rd was the latest he wanted to go. But anyway, it's not important. So I mean, when I tell you that, and so anyway, so I call Yumi, and I'm like, what can we do about this? How can we get this done? And they're essentially like, We just can't. It's not going to be possible. Jeff is not going to respond to us quick enough. They're not going to do this. They're not going to do that. You're going to lose that property. And, obviously my wife and I had invested a ton of emotional energy into getting excited about this, about planning where we were going to put things. So it was just a devastating blow. So the only thing they told me that might help is if I call as the current client and continuously harass them, maybe they would make an exception and start working faster. And so that's what I started doing. 73 phone calls over 11 and a half hours. The first 2 weeks, I think it took me the first 3 weeks to figure out basically what would happen is so I think it's better for you to know how Chaffa actually works before I tell you how I went about it. So Chaffa is not a single company. Chaffa is 4 separate entities standing on top of each other in a trench coat pretending to be one company. So you have the Chaffa employees themselves who are local people, I guess, that do mortgages and do like it seems like the front like sort of selling of the mortgage. That's what they do. Then you have Chaffa's actual servicers, and I think that's Dolvenmule is how you might pronounce it. I don't know. They're the ones that actually work on the documents, review the loans, do things like that. Then you have Chaffa's customer service department, and or you have a contractor that does Chaffa's customer service. And then last but not least, you have a separate attorney who reviews all account documents. So I'm attempting to call to speak to somebody to speed up the process. And I keep getting Chaffa's customer service department, and they would waffle so much between what they would tell me. It was absurd. Some days I would call and they'd be like, "Oh, it's in underwriting and we're moving toward a close date the next couple of weeks." The next day I would call and it'd be like, "It's not anywhere near underwriting. They're still reviewing the documents." Ultimately, what I determined is that there was one woman who was working on the loan, and the only way to get in touch with her was to call the customer service department and request a callback. And that callback could happen between 1 to 2 business days. And I think that the problem I ran into initially, the reason I didn't speak to her for the first almost 2 weeks of calling daily, was because anytime I called, I think that reset the 1 to 2 day countdown. So if I didn't wait 2 days, I wouldn't hear from her, because then she would get a new request and she had a new 48-hour window within which to call me, which of course was not comforting, because then I'm just sitting there waiting for her to call. And I think I made 12 callback requests of her, and I only ever got 3. So it's not like she was very communicative. But ultimately, like, we submitted, so we had, our lender had a connection into the upper realms of Chaffa, and he reached out to that guy to try to put pressure on this woman. I submitted a complaint to the Colorado Consumer Finance Board to try to put pressure on her. We called the people locally. We got in touch with like the local president to try to put pressure on her, and it was just a fight, tooth and nail, to keep this loan moving. And literally, we didn't know. So, so ultimately, like, I think we bumped up our asking price on for the property that we were looking to buy by $5,000 to cover the March and April expenses, or the February and March expenses of our buyer. or our seller, excuse me, so that he would stay in the sale with us. And fortunately, he held on. And that was despite the fact that that man knew nothing about what was going on at any point in time. I think our actual saving grace is that the real estate agent of our seller had done assumptions before, and she knew what it was like to be sort of on the at the mercy of the process. So I think it was, so our close date was March 20th, and we got the call on March 16th. Yeah, March 16th that we had documents and were ready to close. So we got it. We got the property. Thank goodness that the seller held out. We did everything we were supposed to do, or everything we needed to do to get it done. But it was perhaps the most miserable experience of my entire life trying to make that happen. So, the sort of last tidbit of the tale is that we finally get through this. We're good, and we get the notice a week beforehand. Not even a week. It was the Tuesday before we closed, which was on a Friday. We got that day that we were closing. And so we thought for sure that our buyers, especially because one of them was out of town when we got the notice that we were going to close, which could have potentially pushed the closing back even further. But anyway, that's not important. We thought that because they were out of town, even though we closed on the Friday, that they would give us until midday Saturday at the least, maybe even till the end of Saturday to actually move out, to get everything out of the house. Because usually you have weeks notice, and we got 5 days, or not even that, 4 days. So my wife's on the phone with our insurance company to do like a rent back thing. It was like a $200 fee or something like that, so that you had like insurance coverage and stuff like that. And our buyer's realtor talked them out of it. And so we're like, shit. So we have to be out of the house by midnight on Friday. And so I get myself, two of my friends, Gabby and my wife and my mom, and we're just desperately loading stuff into the truck. And U-Haul doesn't have the length we want, so we have to load up all of the boxes into the truck, and then we have to go unload that at my mom's house and then come back and get the furniture. And oddly enough, we thought that was going to work out great, because our buyer was going to do their final walkthrough at 6. So we were like, perfect. We'll leave the house at like 5:45, go unload stuff at my mom's house, come back at 7 to get the furniture, and then we're out. But I guess our buyer and their dumb as shit realtor showed up, saw that there was still stuff in the house, saw that we weren't there, and didn't do their walkthrough. So I'm showing back up with the U-Haul at 7, and I see the buyer's agent leaving the property and through the back door, and I'm like, oh good, they're just leaving. So I drop my friend off, who's helping us move. I drop him off at the front door, and then I circle back around to pull in so that we can unload stuff out the back. And she comes up to me and she's talking to me for like 10 minutes, to the point where, because I was supposed to go to the front and let my two friends in, to the point where they walk around the line of townhomes to see what the hell is going on. And I have never in my entire life stood there and listened to someone who said so much and yet nothing at all. She would say things like, well, we don't want to rush you out of here. our buyer would just the buyer would just feel more comfortable if he had a key by tonight. Blah 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 blah. I was like telling her how much work I had done to make sure that this closing happened. Oh my god. And so ultimately felt like she was giving me this message of like, we don't want to rush you out of here, which made me think, oh, so you are giving us to Saturday. And it was only later that I realized that what she meant is, oh, we didn't think you would actually take until midnight. We didn't realize, we thought the property was vacant. And we're like, are you like retarded? What do you mean? No. Did the listing say it was a vacant property? Why would you assume it was vacant? So, and so anyway, she finally leaves, and I even asked my two buddies who were standing there. I'm like, did either of you understand what the hell she meant? And both of them were like, no, man, that was the most confusing string of words I've ever heard in my life. So I don't think I'm alone in my confusion at whatever the heck she was on about. One of my friends made the comment, he was like, oh, no, man, I was like trying to cast a hex the whole time to ward her off, like horrible, bad warp vibes, whatever. So we get back to work. We're getting furniture in. We're doing as much loading as we possibly can, as fast as we can. 10 o'clock rolls around, and one of my buddies is like, hey, man, I got to go. We're like, cool. He walks out the door, and the realtor comes back in. And she's like, okay, what can I help with? And then she proceeds to not help with anything at all. And then she tells us that the buyer is coming to do his final walkthrough, and we're like... And so my wife has to spend 20 minutes of the time we were supposed to have to be clearing out this property, doing a walkthrough, showing them like all the stuff about the house, blah, blah, blah. And I get the sense that my wife wanted to just punch that realtor because she was like talking all proud about how she talked our buyer out of doing the buyback program and blah, 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 blah. And then they were walking through, and we're like, we left like our coat rack and like the pegboard in my closet in those areas, because that's usually how that stuff works. You leave things that are mounted like that. And she's like, do you want them to take this down? And we're like, we are trying to get the hell out of here. But ultimately, we did take those things down. And funny enough, our coat rack is this like long rectangular piece, more like this long. And I guess we hung that up after my wife had painted the living room purple, but we painted the living room white to try to sell. So when we took it down, there's just this big purple rectangle now on their wall. So that was really freaking funny. But yeah, so they were just in the way, and the one buddy who stuck around was helping me get stuff cleared out, and we finally got it. Go back to my mom's house and sleep for the night. But the next Jesus, the story itself is just making me tired. Yep, the next few days were just the somewhat laborious process of moving. But we ended up getting the house that we really liked. And we ultimately demanded that Yumi reduce their fee, which was really nice. And our realtor on the selling side reduced her fee in the hopes of going after Yumi for more of that money back. So I'm hoping that she got that, because I think she deserved to get paid. I do not believe Yumi did. So it was a long process. It was really exhausting. And I'm happy it's over. And I think this is a house we can stay in for a good 5 years. And quite frankly, that's like the minimum amount of time I want to stay in this house. And if we do move, we are not doing an assumption loan, for the love of Christ, unless interest rates are like 20% and someone's got like a 6%, then we're not moving. We're not doing an assumption loan. So But things are better now. Um, I wasn't recording for a long time because Saturday mornings were like basically the only time I got to myself. Saturday and Sunday mornings, and you have to talk pretty loud to get this microphone to pick it up. But I wanted the clear audio style, so and it would wake up the baby, and it would wake up my wife, and so ultimately I was like, all right, this has got to get out. This has got to be put on hold until we move. Now there's a door, a corner, a staircase, another corner, the whole kitchen, another door, the whole kitchen, the hallway, and then the door to our bedroom and the door to my daughter's room that are separating them from this audio. So 3 doors, several corners, and a whole kitchen. Should be plenty fine. So this looks like it's my longest episode yet at around 31 minutes so far. I think going forward, I'll sprinkle back in stories over the last year. Mostly I'm going to try to do moving forward stuff. I think one of the key stories is probably the dog bite, because that happened in May of last year. God, I can't believe that was over a year ago. But I think for now, this is good. Catches you up on the move, why I wasn't recording, the chaos of that, and why I never want to do it again. So, thanks for listening. I don't remember how I end these things, so I'm going to not so gracefully hover over the stop button, say thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.